my background is one that where I was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. Both parents living at home with my three older siblings, one brother and two sisters. My oldest sister was 10 years my senior, and brother 8 years, and then the younger sister was 5 years. And it was I would say that we were, we had a good family life. Both my parents worked at jobs on a daily basis. My mother was a stenographer, and my father just did all kinds of jobs like chauffeur and gardening and things like that. But we were well taken care of, and we always had education stressed in our childhood, and we had a good family life, and the neighborhood was very supportive. So, as you may have heard the saying, you know, it takes a village to raise a child, and that's true with it. I started throwing papers when I was 9 years old because my brother gave it to me after he went off to school, and he started when his second youngest cousin stopped, and then he stopped when his oldest brother stopped. So we all four of us threw papers when we were growing up. But when I was, I think I must have been in the 7th or 8th grade, my mother's company was a African-American insurance company in Memphis, Tennessee. And they had just completed building their company a new building. And I went to the opening, and I was just in awe to see this sort of brand new building with offices and desks and people working. And I found out that the architect for the building was a African-American and company. And the name of the company is McKissick and McKissick, probably one of the first African-American architects in the country. I got a chance to meet him, one of the brothers, actually. And I was extremely impressed. And I went home that day saying, you know, I never heard of an architect before, but I went home and said to my mom, that's what I want to be. I want to be an architect. I was extremely impressed. I'd never been in a building, you know, so new and so beautiful and so well organized. So when I got a chance to take mechanical drawing in the 9th grade, which must have been a couple of years later, I really enjoyed that. So the school system, which is a segregated school system in the city of Memphis, Tennessee, they had, you could take mechanical drawings, or you could take shop, mechanical repair. So I signed up for the mechanical drawing, and the next year there was a more advanced course you could sign up for. And I guess I must have done fairly well, and I really liked it. So I didn't know what I was going to do for the industrial education component of my academic training in high school. So I went to my drafting teacher, who had taught me for a couple of years, that drafting course, and said, you know, I told him about how I like architecture, and I read books and everything else. He said, well, that's interesting. He said, so I wonder if would you like to take an architectural drawing course, a special course? And if you did, maybe you could find one or two other students. Well, we weren't too successful in finding more than a couple of students, but he did develop a new drawing curriculum for me in the 11th and 12th grade. So I took architectural drawings, and I learned a lot from this individual. And obviously, when I finished, I knew exactly what I wanted to to actually wanted to be, and that was an architect. And I wanted to be trained as one at the university. So that sort of was the beginning and how I got started in, in the field of architecture. At the time, that was in 1955 that I went off to college. Everything in the South was segregated, separate but equal. They had a system in the state of Tennessee where if you were trying to go on a major where they didn't teach it, they would pay for your out-of-state fee to go to that school. However, I wrote to the education department in the state of Tennessee, and they said, well, Tennessee State has just started a program. Tennessee State is a historic Black college and university system. Just started a program of architectural engineering. And I said, well, that is great. So I went there and I registered in that program. And I spent, it was a 5-year program, and I got what they call a Bachelor of Science degree in architectural engineering. Now, in the meantime, the University of Tennessee had a full accredited program in architecture. And so I was extremely lucky to have gone there at the time, because the Black professor who headed up the department, it was just a department, not even a school of architecture, not to think of a college of architecture, and it didn't have accreditation for architecture. But he was a graduate of the University of Oklahoma in planning, the first Black to graduate from there. And this is when I got introduced to a lot of the Oklahoma staff. But anyway, and he told me, he said, based upon the materials we have and the faculty and everything else, I strongly recommend that you go off and get a master's degree. And so that was what I wanted to do after I finished college. And this is how I got introduced to the University of Oklahoma, but it didn't happen directly that I went to the University of Oklahoma. It really happened after I had no success in trying to get into any of the graduate schools of the separate but equal schools of the South. So that's kind of the way I got started and had my first training. By the way, the Black firm of McKissick and McKissick, you may want to Google it. During my sophomore, junior, and senior year summers, I worked for that firm because they were based in Nashville, where the school was. So there was sort of a turnaround as I started. They were the catalyst for my wanting to go into architecture, and then in the end, I had a chance to work during the summers there. And then after graduation, I worked there for a year. So that was kind of how I got started in architecture. A couple of things. After I finished my Bachelor of Science degree in architectural engineering, I worked for a year at McKissick, and I was trying to get enrolled in graduate school, as I mentioned before. And most of the schools hadn't heard about Tennessee State University. So the 5 years I spent there, they wanted me to start over again as a freshman and get an undergraduate degree, because they said it wasn't accredited. They didn't know anything about it, had no history. And so I was having a very difficult and sort of depressing time. So I mentioned to my professor, who was an OU graduate, and he said, well, maybe I should put a call into the professor out at the University of Oklahoma and tell them the situation, that I've been your professor, and you certainly have shown that you would have the skills and educational background and accomplishment that any undergraduate degree student in architecture anywhere, and explain that it's just starting now and it's just no history, and see will they consider bringing you in, and or what they could do, maybe take a year there before they let you into graduate school. So he did that, and they said, well, we know you, Quincy, we know that you would give us the facts about the student. We'd be willing to take a chance on him if he'd be willing to come out and maybe spend a year or year and a half in the undergraduate school, in which he could get the equivalency of a bachelor's degree in architecture, and then we could get him into the master's program a lot sooner, him starting from the beginning as a freshman. So I said, that's great, I will do that. So I went out, I think in the winter semester, starting in January of '62. And this is when I met Mendel Glickman. He was the chairman of the School of Architecture, Frank Lloyd Wright's engineer. And Herb Green taught me a drawing course. And Schallenberger, and I think I had a course on New York. And I do remember passing students one day, and they were saying, who is this guy, Robert Wesley, with these drawings up on the wall? We don't know who he is. And look at these drawings. So I just kept walking, because I didn't know any of them, and they didn't know me. But after one semester, they said, you don't need to go to undergraduate school anymore. You have the equivalency. That's another story that's gone. But anyway, they let me into graduate school. So that, to me, is one of the things I always remember, that I don't know what I would have done, because I just didn't feel I had the exposure and experience with my first degree, which was kind of split with architecture and engineering in such a new school. But the fortunate thing is that the professor Leon Quincy Jackson, who was the chairman of our department, he was very bright, very talented guy, and he was very tough on it. I mean, we used to talk about him all the time because we hated his guts, but we didn't know he was really learning. I mean, I never met Bruce Goff, but I knew him intimately because he ran his school the way Goff ran his, with lectures and music and symphony and opera and all kinds of, he didn't dress like Bruce Goff did, but I knew all about Bruce Goff. So when I went off, I had a good idea of what the university was all about, and I guess after one semester, the staff there agreed. And so that, to me, was one of the highlights of my life, to get me on the right track without getting depressed. Who knows, I may have just given up and gone someplace else. The other thing, when I was there at the undergraduate school, the first semester, I remember my landscape class, we were all excited about going down to Dallas because they always had this tour of gardens and things down there, but the landscape class. And so I raised my hand, I was ready to go and everything else. Then I realized, oh my goodness, this is Oklahoma, the South. This is really the deep South, going down there. Where am I going to stay? And they can't, I can't stay in the hotels there because they were segregated. So forth. So I told my professor that I would have to withdraw from making the trip. I would love to make it, but because of the circumstances. And he said, we already talked about that. Said the class has said you're going, and if they won't accept you at the first class, at the hotel we want to go to, we'll go to the hotel where you go, and we'll all be together one way or the other. So it turned out we were accepted where we wanted to go, but it just showed that the staff and the students were they were extremely nice and very kind and very, very understanding. So I had a great time. I had wonderful teachers, and the experience there of letting me in and get started on my master's program at accelerated rate was extremely beneficial, and I'll always remember that. Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, um, I think sometimes people tend to focus a lot on the nuts and bolts of a profession rather than the whole picture of the profession. Empathy and being able to work with people and being a team player and accepting real challenges. So I had all of those things at OU of things that seemed kind of dark and bleak that I had to mentally, get myself prepared for. At the same time, I had people who were kind and generous and very supportive at OU. Not only from the faculty and staff. I mean, I think what Glickman did to let me in there was probably something he did as a personal favor to me, but it worked out okay. And the students accepted me. I mean, all of these things, I think, builds a person's character and gives him a good foundation. When you're developing. So, and OU was an excellent school. I mean, the history behind it. Wright used to come out all the time, even when golf was there. And Wright used to say, I think he one of the project Price Tower he did up in Bottlesville, Oklahoma. I think either one of the sons of the old man Price wanted golf to do it, and I think the old man Price asked Frank Lloyd Wright about it. They let golf do it. Well, you gotta calm him down a little bit this design. So you had all these influences that were, were very talented, very creative people coming with different backgrounds and diversity of skills and so forth. And Glickman and golf and Wright and so forth. And it made for a very rich environment of creative individuals who if you're in that environment and you apply yourself, you learn a great deal. And you take that on off when you go out to practice. You remember those things, and they become part of your your DNA of your profession. After my graduation from Tennessee State University, I just wanted to go to the very best. So actually, in addition to putting I didn't have the funds to go to the top schools necessarily of the private schools like Harvard or Stanford and so forth. I just didn't have the funds for it. But anyway, I did put an application into Harvard. They wrote me a very nice letter a couple of times, and they tried to explain why they didn't accept me, which was back to the new department at Tennessee State University. I was fortunate. I just didn't know that, I didn't know much about Oklahoma, and there's not many schools had the kind of creative, brain power and as to architecture as Oklahoma had at that time. I mean, they had really extremely recognizable people, and you see a lot of postmodern architecture today, and you see some pretty wild buildings, but I mean, I mean, how wild can you get in Herb Green's house, you know, in the prairie? Bruce Goff Cold house, you know, and I get engulfed at the Babinger house. These are guys that in some ways 50 years ahead of their time. So, and my professor, I mean, his drawings, I mean, they were like Herb Green drawings and golf. I mean, these drawings are just gorgeous, they're just beautiful. So I think in some ways, I mean, I just got very lucky, went to a top school with, you know, and it comes down to the talent, you know, the professors who are going to run the school, and to have Glickman there. And you know the story about Johnson Wax building with the mushroom columns, you know, had the loaderman was standing underneath it. I don't think Glickman did it, but anyway, he's such a nice and gentle man. But I mean, he was talking about Candela, who's another well-known structural engineer. Glickman was in that at that level of very creative and talented and well-known structural engineers throughout the world. So it just was, Oklahoma was, they set themselves apart with the staff and the kind of individuals they had there. And that's what it came down to. I was very fortunate. We would be at that time, I don't know where you are now, because I haven't been out there in a long time, but we were underneath the stadium, and all the big games were going on and everything, you know, Notre Dame playing OU. We were downstairs, busy drawing. And so, I mean, that was the kind of environment, studio. Everybody loved it, and they just got along very well, and they had just extremely talented individuals running and teaching that school of architecture. Herb Green was a quiet guy, very quiet. He didn't say very much. You sort of learned from him by his work and his products, you know, his projects and everything. Very quiet, and he was very patient. He would be very thorough. If you asked him questions, he would take his time with you and everything. So I just remember him as a very mild-mannered individual who was extremely talented, and he did most of his, you know, talking and verbalization through his creative projects that you would see, and those would be very inspirational. And anytime you need to see him talk about an issue or so forth, he was always there. So that's how I remember him. We were the first class at Tennessee State University to get architecture and engineering degree there, and I was still even just as fortunate when I went to SOM and worked there for 40 years. I was the first Black partner there. I just think I was just lucky. I mean, it just way things that you know worked out. Some things were very difficult. When I left the University of Oklahoma, you know, I had that 5-year degree at architecture and engineering. I had the equivalency of a 5-year degree in architecture at Oklahoma, but I had a real master's certificate in architecture from there, and I couldn't find work. No one would hire me. I went back home, and I was ready to set the world on fire, you know. And I had the experience of working on the campus at Tennessee State. I worked for McKissick the summer as my last couple of years, 2 or 3 years. And then I worked a year between undergraduate and before I got accepted to actually at Oklahoma. So I had experience, and I had basically three degrees, and I put applications in my hometown of Memphis, and didn't get hired. And then came to Chicago, where my sister lived in Joliet. It's a suburb. And for a year, I couldn't get hired there. So, so it wasn't always easy, but at that point, I knew what I was going to do. I even have to start an office myself. So I left Chicago after staying with my sister about 6 to 8 months and went home. And as soon as I got home, about 2 or 3 weeks later, I got a call from the state of Illinois unemployment office, because I put the application everywhere. And they said they had a couple of positions that they think that I would be a good candidate for the interview. And I asked them what it was all about. What was it? And they said they couldn't talk to me about it because I was out of state. And then once I came back up, they could talk to me and set it up. So quickly I went back, and there was a job from GSA, and then there was another job, but interview they set up for me with GSA, and one at Skidmore and Zimmerman. So I did them both, and they both offered me positions, and obviously that's where I started at SOM. And I would, after a year or two, I would get calls from SOM from different firms, and they would say, well, we see your file here, we need people, and we don't even understand why we didn't hire you in the first place. You have 3 degrees and everything. So this is Memphis. And so I said, well, I said to myself, they probably didn't have a photograph of me, obviously, in the file. So, but actually, in the University of Tennessee, I guess I've been in SOM about 5-7 years. They called me and they wanted me to teach a course, and I told them, I was happy where I was, but I also let them know that unfortunately I had applied there and they denied my application. They said they were shocked, and but then they realized that they understood why. So things happen, but you just have to be positive about it. And I think when you have a family that supports you, and when you had a professor, Leon Quincy Jackson, at my undergraduate, supported you, and even though it was tough on you to try to learn, and you had a staff at OU that supported you and treated you just like any other student. These are characteristics that can help lead you, because you're going to have failures. You're going to have things that you may even not do them right or not do them correctly. But that's part of living and growing. So you learn from your mistakes if you make them, and you keep working, and you eventually things will work out. Yeah. It was different. SOM was different. SOM is it's one of the leading architecture firms in the world, and I was somewhat naive, I think. It's these guys. I remember I still remember the impression when I went there. This huge floor, everybody had on dark pants and white shirts and ties. I mean, it was amazing. They too, probably SOM more than any institution I went to. There was so much talent and diversification, of the staff, and creativity. I mean, it's like a university itself. I mean, especially if you once you get out of college, that's where you want to go, because you'll learn so much. You'll learn so much and so quickly, and the projects are so challenging and unique. And you get a chance to, practice with the best in the world. And obviously, if you at that point you're trying to get your license, so you got to spend at least 3 years before you're eligible to take it on the apprenticeship program. And those licenses are not easy. I mean, they're like 5 days, and one day is a 12-hour exam session. But I like Oklahoma at SOM. I never had anyone treat me differently than anyone else there, and I just learned a great deal. It was a great place to work. I worked all over the world, all kinds of languages, all kinds of projects, and with all kinds of people. And I was just very fortunate I think to have been able to practice and to been able to go to schools at certain institutions. And those learning years at SOM was like they call it sometimes a University of SOM, University. I mean, it's a lot of young architects. They don't, engineers or planners. They don't stay. They just try to go there to get the training because they realize it's tough to get to the top. Well, I probably was just too naive. I didn't realize I couldn't get to the top, so I was fortunate. I know I had an experience where somebody told me that, oh, you'll never make partner. Why are you even thinking about it? But I don't like those kind of negative connotations. I like to disprove them. So I have no control over it. But the thing about partnerships is it is difficult because every actual partner has to agree to bring you on board, and so it was. I was again very fortunate to practice as a partner for about 20 years, and so that was good. Well, you know the old saying, who is your favorite child? Well, um, I had I don't know. Um, I guess some of my favorite projects are the ones that were the most difficult ones to work out. Um, some of my last projects, I really, I don't know. Actually, I don't know. If one of my first projects I worked on, when I was at University of Oklahoma, my master's project was designing a cultural center for in Lagos, Nigeria, for the country. And I was wanting to make part of my master's program to visit there for at least a month or two. And I had been writing to the State Department of the university to help me do that, but it just didn't. I just didn't have enough time to get there. But one of my first projects when I went to interview at SOM, I showed them this project from University of Oklahoma, which is like 3 pods, and the person who was interviewing me from SOM says, "Oh, you're perfect for here." He says you can work with Walter Netz. Well, Walter Netz is he was kind of like Herb Green, and he was really way out there with some of his projects, and so he was at the time designing a library building at Northwestern University that had 3 pods, and that's where I started. So every now and then I go back to SOM, everybody says, "Bob, we've seen your drawings." Well, everything on our drawings then, I drew everything, the screw, the nail, everything, and there was no space of white. When I finished with the lining, it was completely covered with either graphic drawings or notes. And so he said, "Well, you cannot put another line on this drawing." All of that was a learning experience. I wanted to know everything about how you put a building together, because if you're going to design one and know how to design it, you have to know all the components and what it's like, what the lighting's like, what the engineering is like, and so forth and so on. So that whole process from starting scratch at SOM of working drawings and then later being a person in charge of all the technical issues of the firm, and then after that, a managing partner, which meant you had to go out and sort of get projects and so forth. So those are just terrific experiences that I learn a lot and enjoy and think about a great deal. Again, it's going. I think it's number one is having good character traits. You always maintain that. It's just it doesn't cost anything to have good characteristic traits of being kind, and having empathy, and being considerate and honest and above board with everyone. The other thing is that you want to go to work or be trained at a place where you can find the very finest professionals you can. It's just the experience there is night and day between just going someplace and making $1, or trying to get your license. You want to go where people are going to be very demanding, they're going to be very tough, and they're going to require the very best out of you. And if it means that you stay, instead of the 8 hours, you stay 10 hours or 12 hours at the beginning, you just do it. Because once you learn it and you get it up top, I mean, they can't take it away from you. No one can take it away. You can make a mistake, but then you'll carry with you how to solve that problem the next time. And you can't lose those traits. So between just being a good person and trying to go and get trained at the best possible institution, and one that is just not what I call boutique shops. There are architectural firms that just design and they hand it off to another firm that does a structural engineer, and hand it off to another firm that will do the mechanical, another one will do the landscape. Try to work in a firm where it's a multidisciplinary firm that has all the disciplines. Because I don't particularly like the silo, because if you work in a firm with a silo, you really don't understand how to put a building together. And it also teaches you teamwork. No matter, even if you work in a firm, a boutique firm, it's still a teamwork process. And teamwork's important because how do you get the best out of the staff and the people that you work with, whether you are the youngest member of the team, or certainly more importantly, where you're the senior person. You are the one who are trying to lead the team. So how do you get the best out of the individuals that are working there? You can't be looking over their shoulders every minute of the day. You have to inspire them. You have to teach them. You have to show them how things are done. So the multidisciplinary firm like SOM where I work, we had not only architects, but structural engineers, mechanical engineers, plumbing engineers, we had landscape planning, urban design. We had them all. And you could just, in the studio, you could just walk 50 feet or 25 feet down the corridor and you get a chance to talk. Well, I want to do this, but I understand this is an interference, and you can sit down and you solve the problem. So it really comes down to having that environment where you can very easily and very simply and conveniently, have a chat and come to a resolution of options to give your client the best possible solution and cost, warrant condition. So those will be the two things: character and I think diversity of disciplines. would be the two things that I think young students should look for in a firm. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we close out our time together?
Well, not. I don't think I have anything else that I could share with you other than say that I'm just so appreciative to my experience at OU. I mean, it's you have to you have to give credit to those who were helped you in your stepping stones to get to where you are, and you have to always remember that they were the ones who helped you hurdle and the different issues that you may face. And I can only praise OU for all the wonderful things that they did for me, like give me an opportunity. I just don't know where I would have ended up if I couldn't have gone to graduate school, because I just felt I just was inadequate to tackle this really noble profession that I look at, because there's so many components to it. You just do need the experience, both academically and commercially, to be able to satisfy what it is that the profession of architecture or engineering or planning does. And OU played an extremely vital part in that with me, and I'm just so grateful to them to this day. I live in a comfortable house, and I had wonderful experiences of travel all over the world and doing different things, and it's all comes back to the foundation, and OU is part of that foundation.